I'd like to talk a bit about accumulating merit and accumulating karma. And I know I'm like a dog on a bone with this stuff. And the point of this whole series of blogs is to help make the intangible tangible, to become familiar with some of the more subtle Buddhist concepts. And, while intellectual distinctions of this kind, they might appear on the surface to be overly conceptual, these particular concepts translate rather quickly into the sphere of action. And that, in the sphere of action, that's where mistakes on our part actually have real consequences. So, as an example, let me give an example. It can be important to understand the difference between accumulating good karma and accumulating merit, because they're quite different. Karma of any kind always has to do with samsara. Samsara is this world of cyclic existence that we all hum around in. And karma never has anything to do with enlightenment. While it's merit that pertains to our eventual liberation from samsara and enlightenment. It's said that the accumulation of karma is certain. It's like a shadow following an object. And it always leads to a higher or lower rebirth within cyclic existence, samsara. And our karma, even the best karma, will never liberate us. But even at the best, it only determines the kind of our next rebirth. So karma is inextricably bound to this world of cyclic existence that we live in. And another point, karma pertains only to our intentional action. Actions of ours that are involuntary, unintentional, or more likely just unconscious, are not karmic, since the volitional accent's absent. With karma, it's always the intent that is important. On the other hand, merit is one of the two causes of our liberation from samsara, our eventual enlightenment, the other being wisdom, or what's called awareness. So merit and awareness are as I say, a dynamic duo, very important to understand. And there are said to be three basic causes for accumulation of merit. And that's generosity or giving, moral discipline, what we might call virtue, and then meditation. So Dharma practice is all about accumulating merit. And this practice, Dharma practice, is most often repetitive, because repetition of meritorious actions is important, if only to get them right. This is one of the reasons that the various Buddhist practices are sometimes repeated, 100,000 or more times, just to make them habitual and help them become automatic and pure. The chief contamination of our actions is considered to be what's called reification. And that's the mistaking of an ever-changing process for a real and permanent thing. It's like the old song, "Row, row, row your boat." And the line in it is, "Life is but a dream." Well, mostly we believe that life is real. We reify it. That's what reification is. And even, in fact, reification is defined in the dictionary, and this is kind of a wonderful series of words, as the fallacy of misplaced concreteness. Like taking for reality what is just something that we imagine or we wish it to be so. Like the imagined permanence of ourself. We do this, we reify all the time. And reification is just a conventional truth that we assume for convenience. It's convenient. For example, the idea that something such as an automobile is a permanent thing. In fact, we can replace every single part in a car, which proves to us that what we have here is a process and not anything more permanent. But in day-to-day life, it's conventionally convenient to consider our car as permanent, even though we know it's not, because we eventually have to get a new one. And we do the same thing, exactly the same thing with our self-image, and so on. And things like acting as if we're going to live forever. I mean, that's reification. We believe that what's impermanent actually exists in a permanent way. In other words, we reify or assign permanence just for convenience. Then we forget we have done that and continue to remain attached to our own creations, the things that we've declared as permanent, that we can depend on. In Dharma terms, these are examples of the obscurations, the kind of obscurations that cloud our mind. And in Buddhist teachings, the two accumulations, again, they're called merit and awareness, are said to be the cure for reification. Merit, or skillful means, requires a certain purity to be effective. And my point here is that it's not always simple to perform a meritorious action without contaminating it with our own tendency towards, our habitual reification. Examples would, without misplaced references to ourself and so on. In Chinese martial arts, it's said that an action has to be practiced 100,000 times for it to become automatic and no longer require conceptuality. Dharma practice is similar. We repeat an action, like saying a mantra, countless times in order to purify that action and to remove the contamination of reification. It's clear that we need to discuss merit and awareness in as much detail as it takes in order to really understand it. For now, I'll leave you with the description of the three kinds of bodhisattvas. It's traditional to list three types of bodhisattvas, and correspondingly, each one of them displays its own type of bodhicitta. Although many lamas point out that only the first type of bodhisattva actually exists, and you'll see why. The three types, from lower to higher, from least to the best, are what they call the king who works for the common good by aspiring first to perfect himself and achieve enlightenment, and only then to help others. The second type is called the ferryman. It's one who ferries sentient beings across samsara to enlightenment, including himself. He goes along in the boat too. And the last and highest form of bodhisattva is called the shepherd. It's one who puts others' enlightenment ahead of himself, refusing to go into enlightenment without everyone else going with him, but like the shepherd drives the sheep before him. And as mentioned, only the first type of bodhisattva is said to actually exist. because unless we are enlightened ourselves, we really can't lead others anywhere. And for me, the way I understand these three is as more like a progression. First, we enlighten ourselves, the king. Then we accompany everyone else to enlightenment, the ferryman. And finally, we learn to put everyone else's enlightenment ahead of our own, the shepherd. So, there you have it.